Hello, Peter. Hello, Stuart. Thanks very much for joining me on the show.
Thanks for having us, Carol.
Yeah, thank you very much.
It's always good to chat, and I know you've got a podcast, your own podcast called Practice Thinkers, and you put some great content out there. What essentially is Practice Thinkers all about, Stuart?
What it says on the tin, really, getting people to kind of, think a little bit more about, how they are training on a day-to-day basis. And I guess it comes down to the fact of, us challenging certain norms or beliefs, or however you want to term them, that we've seen in golf, and probably other sports as well, to be honest, like not just synonymous to golf. But yeah, then just try to get people to think a little bit differently. Or if they are doing some really, really good stuff, understand a little bit more like why they're doing that sort of stuff and why is it so good, So that's what it is, really.
Pete?
Yeah, I mean, just really from a practical point of view, like the individuals that we work with, it's just getting them to kind of log what they're doing on a day-to-day basis and seeing like what are you doing and like how does that match your beliefs. I mean, an example I shared recently where I had a player where we're looking at they're getting a lot of performance anxiety in tournament play. But when we look at his practice, we're like, he's practicing for the wrong exam. So if you're studying for the wrong exam and then sit that exam with the wrong preparation, of course you're going to feel anxious and all the things he was feeling in tournament play.
And what essentially was wrong with the way he was approaching his practice that wasn't?
I mean, it was all technical work. His belief system was he had to kind of groove his swing on the range and make it perfect, but to actually go on the golf course. So all his practice was basically out of context. It was not what the demands of the sport ask at a professional level. So like the emotions he was feeling in tournament play, anxious, not sure what to do, were completely normal because again, he was studying for the wrong exam.
It's like standing in front of an audience and giving a speech that you're not prepared for, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And you'll know as well, Carl, like when you kind of think about, players that, we were speaking about it yesterday, Pete and I, about, golfers are on their own a lot, right? So we're also trying to help them, I guess, like make potentially better decisions on a day-to-day basis, or, but human nature is to do things that we like to do rather than things
What's
that
needed.
and things that we kind of like consciously think about and go, okay, I'm going to do this today. I'm going to do this today. It's not what I would normally do. It's not kind of comfortable for me, but I know that I come out the back end of it kind of better and having done something a little bit more productive. So it's like on that day-to-day basis, like more, like better decision making, I think, with regards to. But if they only know one thing, then it's very difficult to make better decisions, isn't it?
Yeah.
So our role is to go, well, hang on a minute. This is what there is and what you're doing, but there's also this over here, So you want to go and play at this level. This is where you are right now. Here are the gaps. It doesn't always need to be what we've always done.
Yeah.
It can be things that like in our world, it's not new, but to a lot of people, it is very new. And when you're trying to interject with new ideas and new behaviors and whatnot, it's hard, and we understand that.
It is. And I think if you look at the sort of existing models that keep being perpetuated, I mean, for a lot of people listening to the podcast, that not everybody who listens obviously is a tour player or an aspiring professional. A lot of club players listen to the show. And I still think this existing model is so strong, isn't it, that if I'm not playing well, I must change my golf swing.
Yeah.
Even Stuart, even if we bought into that idea, that you're trying to change some fundamental movement patterns. Let's say you've been playing the game for a while and somebody's telling you to change some of these existing patterns. What's the reality of that? And what would it take to change fundamental movement patterns?
Yeah, it would take a huge amount of effort to start with, and very, very, this is where I think that, if we look back at Anders Ericsson's work on deliberate practice, it needs to be very, very focused on what they're trying to do. But when I see people do it, I think they're missing certain components, right? So and again, Pete and I have spoken about this. If somebody's let's say a chronic slicer of the golf ball, right? And which a lot of golfers are.
Yeah.
Well, I think for me, I don't necessarily need to turn that player into a high bomb drawer for him to play better golf, right? So that would be quite extreme and be very, very difficult, over the long term. But if you could actually say, okay, well, let's kind of like look at some bookends here. So you're doing this right now. What if you just did less of that and we tried to kind of like add a little bit of like differential learning in there and just playing around with it and say, because it's not about changing a movement pattern. It's actually having the adaptability to actually kind of change it or do something different with it in the moment to when they're going to play. So when they're out on the golf course and they hit this big wipey cut again, which goes close to out of bounds, that player in that moment can go, this is what I did, but I can slightly adjust this or kind of adapt to this and hit less of a cut on the next shot ultimately. But it's not, but I think where people go awry with this, they think, I need to just get there, have no target and just groove it in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where actually we have more success with playing around with all different things. So what if you did this? What if you did this? What if you swung the hands up higher? What if you swung the hands lower? What if you, and actually and having a target or something that you're actually still trying to hit towards.
Yeah.
They'd have way more success. And then when they go, okay, that's the shot I wanted to hit, change club or change target. Don't just stay there with the same club and just go, that's it. I got it now. And I need to just keep doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the other thing we've seen as well, and this goes into more the, I'd say the constraints framework, is that instead of like breaking it into like little segmented pieces, just put a barrier in the way or something like that you can keep the movement whole.
Yeah.
Because that's ultimately what we're trying to do when we get on the golf course.
A head cover can transform a golf swing, can't it?
It's just little simple things like that.
Yeah.
If somebody's hitting down on their driver too much, put a golf ball pack like that, an empty golf ball pack in. So they have to kind of launch it a little bit more over that.
Yeah.
Just little things like that can really, really kind of get people aware of what they're doing. I think for starters, and be able to then adapt what they have ultimately. Not change what they have.
Yeah. And does it come down, Pete, to a more effective way? I mean, I've said it so many times on this show, people will be bored of hearing this, but is it the fundamental question of what's wrong with my swing or what's wrong with my shot? Because if you ask the question, what's wrong with my swing, that can be a dark tunnel that you go down and may never emerge from. But if it's, as Stuart's just said, what's wrong with my shot, that's got an end point. It's got a start point and an end point, hasn't it?
100%. I think it's back to, we discussed that in our coach education course on swing changes. It's like first principles. It's like, what's the ball doing? What's the strike like? Yeah, it's like, and thinking it back to like stripping it back to its purest form. What do you have on the golf course? You don't have TrackMan, you don't have training aids. When you're performing, you have your feel, your kinesthetic awareness, what the ball's doing, strike. Yeah. Right. So then you should be training often with the things that are actually, and it's a more whole golf swing. You're not breaking your golf swing into parts on the golf course. Well, I hope you're not. But
also, Pete, as well, like if somebody goes on the golf course, right, and they're using something on the driving range as well, take that thing on the golf course as well.
Exactly.
Actually and actually try some stuff with it on the course as well. So it doesn't become so
100
foreign of like, oh, I do it here, then I don't
Yeah.
do it here.
100%. I think Ian Renshaw's paper, that second serve one with volleyball,
Yeah.
I've been using that quite a lot for experimentations. With a player recently, well, we're still scoring, but he's using like a phantom hole for start line on patterns. So the first putt he gets to use the phantom hole, and then his second serve will take it away. But then when he gets to a certain score, everything gets taken away. So he has to actually just putt normally, and then he has to maintain that score for 3 holes. So that there's a little bit of it, like experimentation on the golf course. You can use that training aid, and then we take it away, and it's more like performance.
Yeah, because whether we like it or not, the reality is that our brain is so sensitive to context, isn't it? And environment. You know, we behave so differently depending on what the environment is. And, you know, we've known this for so long, really, but the environment called practice and range for most people is completely the opposite as to the environment called golf course. It's like the difference between football and rugby almost.
But that's the
Yeah.
interesting part for me is that, you know, as part of my doctorate that we're interviewing players and doing a practice map. So we see what these players actually do and then question them about it. So it's almost like if I need to change or influence a behavior, do I need to challenge the belief system first?
Mm.
Because if that person or that individual believes that this is what they have to do, and that's been passed down from wherever, right? Somebody said, you have to go and do this rote repetition to ingrain a movement. Okay. Well, if that's all they know and that's all what they believe in, then that's what they're always going to do.
Mm.
So if we start to backtrack and go, okay, I understand that. And back in the 1930s and 40s, that was a prominent approach. It's what the military did a lot of their research on and whatnot to do with motor learning. But actually, we've moved on a little bit from that right now. So we have this other area here or something more that might help you. Do you want to learn about that or do you want to understand that? And then all of a sudden, you're not saying to them, you must do it, but you're giving them an alternative to be able to go, oh God, I didn't know about that. And that actually sometimes that makes more sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's just sense making at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. And ultimately as well, I mean, you know, we've all seen it for so many years, you know. I still see people on the putting green with all the mirrors and the ropes and all the rest of it. And the one thing it doesn't look like is fun. It's just it doesn't seem to be a particularly enjoyable experience. It's almost like there's this embedded belief that if I torture myself in this way for long enough, surely I deserve then to actually start to hold some putts. Pete? What would you say? What would your opinion on the value of training aids? What does your research say on the value of actually? Because there's a plethora out there, there's a whole industry out there. But from your research, what's your understanding?
Well, I guess not much. Some more learning research. I would say, like, what's the purpose of this? Like, wow, like I think training aids used properly. I mean, TrackMan's a training aid. Like they're all just like used properly. They can be useful for exploration of movement. But like, how are you like integrating this training aid to performance? Where most players find that it's like, as she was saying there, like rote repetition or even like challenging somebody where they bought the latest training aid. You know, I think we discussed this before where there's a few latest training aids out and I've got a pro recently that's bought one of them. And it's like, well, why have you bought it? And he couldn't give me a reasoned answer. I was like, you're a Formula One car. You're putting basically crap in your engine. Yeah. Because you don't know why you're using it. It's just, so I would be questioning an individual, what is the purpose of this training aid and how is it going to transfer performance? And if we don't have a solid answer, we can explore it because I think training aids are useful in the right context. Like, as you're saying, take out in the golf course. If you're exploring I don't know, your ball flight, and it's something to do with your wrist angles and it's changing your ball flight, then back to first principle. What's it doing with strike? What's it doing with the ball flight? And then can I do it on the golf course? Can I do it without the training aid? Whereas, like, again, it's the concept of time in the room. Like, if you spend all your time with that training aid, right, then you become adapted to that training aid. It doesn't actually transfer to performance.
The other thing I wish with training aids as well, personally, as an industry, that we had a little bit more rigor that goes in behind, you bringing a training aid out onto the market.
Yeah.
Because it's a bit too much like the Wild West for me. Like, you can just literally just produce something and just go and sell it, get a few pros to kind of try
Endorse it. Yeah.
and you'll sell it. Where I just don't think that doesn't fit very well with my ethics, and to be honest. But back when I worked for when I was just a golf coach and I hadn't even dipped my toe into academia, I'd have probably done the same, to be honest.
Yeah.
But
it's a very appealing idea, isn't it? That you can buy something from Amazon and you can just stand there and repeat, and it will actually make you a better golfer. It's appealing to the ego, isn't it? That there's
and
an
it's a
answer.
massive business for people as well.
Yeah.
Huge business.
I mean, I don't think Stu and I are like, I certainly have, even after a glass of wine in the evening, I've woken up with bought a training aid online. Like, why have I bought that? From one teaching, so it's like, we're not.
You need to drink better quality wine, Pete. That's the secret.
He's one of those late night shoppers.
Twitchy fingers, or maybe just less wine. But yeah, we're not immune to it as well. I think it's just like, if you're buying a training and asking yourself the questions, how is this going to help me in performance, and how am I going to use it, like, to get my desired results?
It goes back again to, we just want to have things easy, and that's very appealing to us. And we all do it in multiple different ways. It's like, you don't go and walk certain places because I can just get an Uber, or a friend, somebody was over from India recently, and he goes, "Oh, yeah, I never really leave my house when I'm in India. I just order everything through my phone." And I'm like, "Yeah, but do you not ever go down the grocery store?" "No, I'll just get it delivered to me." So it's just ease, isn't it?
Well, there's a million things like that, Stuart. And I mean, go back 30 years, everybody watched the car, didn't they? But not myself included. Not many do.
No. I think yeah.
Sorry, just while we're on this sort of theme, Stuart, what's your thoughts on drills, as in not so much with training aids, but drills as in stopping in various positions in the golf swing and things like that, again, which is hugely popular, and you see so much out there in terms of Instagram and the latest drill. What's the actual reality of doing that?
Yeah, so I mean, it depends on what the player's actually trying to do, and I think it goes back to that belief of, am I trying to repeat something, or kind of like, again, ingrain it, or program it, which has come from that world of engineering and computers, kind of. But again, if we're looking at it from a physiological standpoint and a performance standpoint, it makes no sense.
No,
because if I'm stopping, then I'm using different deceleration and acceleration properties within my movement to actually stop than what I actually do when I'm hitting a golf shot. So I think it goes back to, well, why? Okay, you're doing that. Why are you doing it to start with? What's the reason? Okay, well, that's either a valid reason or a flawed reason based on where we are in the world and what we kind of know. Okay. Well, can we do something? Can we develop a cue or a kind of a, use some form of constraint or something that you can keep the movement whole, but actually have the desired thing that you're trying to do here? But the other principle is, well, if you're trying to stop or you're trying to do something, that's not influencing what you're trying to do with a golf ball, then what's the point in doing it?
Yeah.
So there's a lot that goes into unpacking stuff like that. And then you start to go into, much more the kind of the movement science of, we all have these things called intrinsic dynamics, which are these stable places where our body wants to move towards. So if I'm trying to get rid of something, but that's actually quite a stable place that I can move to, you're literally wasting your time. And then also when we start to kind of really
So would that be, just to jump in, Stu, sorry, but like an example that would maybe be, you've got shorter arms. It's like Terry Rowles and Mike Adams stuff. Like,
so I think that's a physical
right,
constraint. Personally, I think
right,
intrinsic stuff is actually, it's internal to us. So it's like, okay, I'm trying to get the club more outside on my move away or my takeaway, but no matter how much I try and do that, my most stable state is when the club just goes inside.
yeah, got you, right.
And so by trying to change that, again, I'm just wasting my time. I need to learn to adapt with where I'm most stable.
Yeah, but on
Ultimately.
that point, 'cause I think that's really, really interesting, is when you're talking about stability, is that the brain trying to seek balance all the time?
Yeah. So it's like where the body gets to a point where it's stable. It's not using up huge amounts of energy
Mhm,
as well. And it's also a stable state in space and how we're moving.
mhm,
It's like players going, like I work with a player that's got across the line all his career, right? Because that's how he's done it. I mean, it's linked to a few physical constraints as well with how he grips the golf club. But even when you try and change that, or, we've not like messed around in practice a little bit, and he can't do it.
mm,
It's just not possible
right,
for him. So if you're trying to again do that and try and change that for the what it looks like, or that's what we perceive that it should be,
mm,
again, it's just really difficult. Like, why can't we learn to play and move with what we have to where we are most stable?
mm.
So then I'm not battling all the time. And I think that's where certain, challenges come in as well.
What if you're teaching from a model, essentially? Like,
But oh yeah, I mean that's just the flaw. I mean, we can't say that that's the necessarily right way to do things, can we?
I think the problem is
I
with the model. If you get 100 people taking the model on board, some are gonna fit through with that and get some benefit, aren't they? But unfortunately, we don't focus on the dead bodies that have been left behind.
yeah, I like, there's a tech guy, Paul Graham, who talks about models, and he says, if you're like, your framework is a model, you should be able to tell me the flaws of that model too. So like, what are the flaws of this model that I'm teaching from, and where are the kind of outsiders, that potentially don't fit this model?
Mm,
Not from a success point of view. What are the flaws of this model, right?
mm,
For
but
example, like for the kind of stuff that we've done in our coach education, we've discussed the flaws of the research in motor learning.
mm,
Especially the stuff that's come through the 70s and 80s, military based, like
mm,
short studies, not longitudinal, lab based.
indoors, lab
Yeah.
based, yeah.
mm,
Yeah.
mm, mm,
But I think with models as well, I mean, it's trying to be, it's a collective, they're trying to bring everybody into that, obviously that model of doing something. But again, it just doesn't hold up under much research, to be honest. And it's just always about that. For me, it's always about that one person in front of you. Or even if you have like 8 golfers at a time, they all have individual things. They all see the world or been in the world and see it differently. So you have to try and do your best that you can to adapt to them, right? And then have a conversation with them of kind of what they're trying to do to improve their golf ultimately.
So what do you both believe is the best way that somebody can interact with a coach in terms of instruction? Because again, the established model is still half-hour slots on a range or hour slots on a range, and I'm fully aware that there's an economic element to this, and people have got to earn a living. There's expectation and all the rest of it. But if we put our dream hat on for a while, what would you say, Pete, would be the most conducive environment for coach and player to develop the game the best they could?
For me, it's always seeing the player in the environment, like watching them perform. Like that's the number one thing.
That radical idea of seeing people on a golf course.
Yeah. I mean, it's the thing is, it's less normal than, again, the economics of it aren't always the greatest, but yeah, any level, seeing somebody perform on a golf course and then linking it back to there. I mean, a recent player, even we do a lot with the Swiss, but like that's an elite level, but played recently with a player I've taught for years and just taking him out the golf course and his behaviour's completely changed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Completely sharp backswing on certain holes, like a kind of straightish drive on the range turned into a slice. You know, it's like just did not see any of that behavior on the range. Or even just like, again, this year watching private clients and Swiss players on the range before a tournament that's bigger in their head, and like the behavior before then of like more like a little bit jumpy behavior on the first day, you know, like maybe just even just the way they're speaking to you or not speaking to you, like their behaviors change. It's just like, oh, that's different. It is like you maybe not see that on a driving range in half an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like for me, I have no issue with half an hour slots for certain types of like coaching, like for like checkups on something
Yeah.
or whatnot.
Agree.
But if you look at, there's two things to this now that, like, look, I spoke to Pete about this, and I think I spoke to somebody else as well, like Joan Vickers, right? Who's very well known for Quiet Eye.
Yeah.
She also has a process called hard first training, and then you work backwards from there, right? And nobody really knows this because Quiet Eye is so prominent within her research. But if you look at it and go, okay, and I think even sometimes like my kids, right? We go on, they started playing golf and whatnot, but we go to the golf course first and then sometimes go to the putting green because all of a sudden they have more of an understanding of why they're doing this on the putting green or chip in or whatnot. It's very difficult to feed forward that element and go, you need to do this because that's the demands that well, go and experience the demands first. And just, it doesn't matter how good you are or what you do or whatnot, just to understand why we might do this half an hour session, right? And we're just working on this for half an hour. And I think the challenge in, driving ranges are big business, right? Again, and some people teach on a driving range that don't have access to a golf course. So if that person or that individual is on that driving range as a coach, do stuff that's prevalent, be really good at maybe developing somebody's speed, right? So like coupling something else with that. Some more capacity stuff rather than skill stuff. Or always keep a target involved, if they're on the driving range, to try and make the driving range as close to a golf course as possible. But on the other side of this, like when we look at, you've been out on tour, a long time, Carl, as well, same with myself and Pete started, more challenge tour and whatnot. But if you see again, the coaching culture, there is a few more starting to go out on the golf course now and kind of watch and whatnot, which is great to see. But when I first went out there, like when I was 25, it just didn't happen.
No.
So what I think what that comes down to is, if we look at that computer model, the brain is a computer, right? That old analogy, I do something on the practice area, right? So I'd give them input or information. They compute that in the brain somehow, and then they go out onto the golf course and it automatically fires out on the golf course. But if you have that view of the world, you're going to think that's normal.
Yes.
But actually, as we move forward to where we are now, we do understand massively how the information that you're picking up from the golf course, certain pins, certain bunker locations, certain water, can you carry that trap? There's absolute hay down the left side, and it's so all those things, we know how much that influences movement.
Yes.
So the question then for me is like, when players go and watch, it's more looking at, we're working towards this type of shot for this type of location. And we start to look at it slightly different and go, oh, hang on a minute, I see something different in that player's behavior. Great, that's something we can talk about when we go back to the driving range and we can move forward again. Well, I saw this happen, for this type. How about we kind of adapt what we're doing a little bit and get you moving in a slightly different direction? How do you think about that? It's more like a whole coaching process that has practice linked into it.
Mm.
A practical example of that is when I was out the weekend there, Stuart, and I'm watching a player really struggle. They'd cut the challenge, so they cut most of the rough into the grain, right? So, and the pins are really tucked. A player I'm watching really struggling chipping into the grain. So I watched that in performance, and then we've obviously the chipping green, everybody's hitting off the fairway, and it's like, you never really did you have that situation on the golf course. I spent an hour, this player just giving them into the green shots, like short-sided all the time. So I think that's what you're getting at, Stu, the information you're seeing, the behaviors you're seeing on the golf course, the situations you're seeing, and then bringing that back to the practice area and then simulating it.
But it's 100%. And like left-handed player that I used to work with, always used to, for left pins, right? I always wanted to cut it into a left pin, but I always tended to kind of like start it too straight and then end up like short-siding it, or, trying to give too much away, right? And then hitting it to like 50 feet, for example. So it's like going, okay, we know this, we can see the kind of the missed pattern of what we're seeing. So then there's the communication. If the swing coach isn't out there, right, I then need to communicate. So the caddy is out there. I ask the caddy, I'm watching as well, but we need to communicate that and say, look, something's going on with left pins. What are you experiencing with left pins? Are you getting like flag, too zoned into your flag rather than your start line, or what's happening? So let's figure out a way of you being able to start it right of that flag and cut it in there. Not just looking at it and going, oh yeah, we need to get, face and swing path. Well, maybe just needs to aim more to the right, just tiny little things, but you just don't see that if you're just doing it on the driving range. Because any accomplished player will be able to go, I'm on the driving range on a flat lie. I can start at that side of that flag or that side of that flag. Easy.
Yeah.
But we just don't see it when it comes to the fact of there's a pot bunker just left of that pin, or there's water short right of this green and you're trying to cut it into a flag.
Wind off the right, howling off the right. Yeah, exactly.
And I think what a lot of it boils down to, one of my sort of core beliefs now is that when anybody goes out to play golf at whatever level, the golf course is either occurring to them as a threat or an opportunity. And movement will emerge differently relative to a threat as opposed to an opportunity, won't it? And, I think what you're both verbalizing so well is all of these explorations are potentially reducing the threat. So you see the golf course as an opportunity to execute some of your skills, whatever they may be or whatever level they may be.
And that's what you're talking about there, I think, elicits emotion, right? So then when it elicits emotion, we understand again through research and just, dipping our toes in speaking to way smarter people than us, how much emotion changes movement.
Yeah.
We can't put our head in the sand anymore and think that it doesn't, because it does. We tighten up, we get overly loose, and we don't really care so much. There's a whole frame of this. It almost comes from that principle of like, oh yeah, I need to control this golf swing, right? But if I reduce my degrees of freedom and I really restrict them, if I'm offline, right? If I'm slightly out, I'm out. I'm not compensating at all. I get frustrated. I get more frustrated. I start trying to control more. It gets more and more and more. And then you come off the golf course so absolutely annoyed with and then just go and try and fix their swing.
Mm.
When actually it's the emotion of that
Yeah.
that's caused the errant stuff that's going on, and the approach that they've taken.
Mm. Mm. And I don't know about
Sorry.
both of you. I sort of see it more than ever now with working with some younger players, that the sort of levels of anxiety and the sort of self-worth that's on the line when they go and play golf these days seems to be off the scale. And I know that's probably a huge discussion of why that's the case. But what would your thoughts be on that?
Again, from my bias or our bias, would be looking at, like, as you say, there's a whole gambit there, but like from a golf point of view, of like what they're doing training wise, like where are they training, I see a lot of young kids, not pros as well, ticking boxes. They do the putting, they do their chip in, they do their approach play, they do their driving, trackman test. But when you look at them, you go, like, how much golf are you playing?
Yeah. I'm staggered when I actually, because that's one of the first questions I always ask, is when you say, how much golf do you actually play? And it's like, it's a strange question, really. Look at you, you're a bit odd. No, I'm working on the game, not playing. It's incredible.
But you can also add that question of like that I'm working on my game. Okay, well, why are you not working on your game actually in play as well?
Yeah.
It's just like everything's too segmented.
Yeah.
I mean, why can't players? I'm trying to do this, trying to do this. Well, go and try that on the golf course as well.
Yeah.
And learn to be detached from the outcome a little bit more, because you're trying to play around with something and then see what kind of happens.
And then obviously throw them back into performance and like have them attached to, like, if there's players that way score, it's like that elicits emotion as well, doesn't it? Like, I mean, the easiest way, and we've discussed this before, the easiest way to mess with a, elite amateur or professional golfer and trainer is mess with score, because they're so attached with it.
And again, and also it's like that principle of players are always looking for something that's that golden nugget, and they hold that so dear to them. Whereas I think that, I don't know, like maybe I'm off here, but I get the impression with like someone like Scotty Scheffler, who has a higher faith, right? And he's been very open with that. It's like, there's no attachment, it's like, I'm just trying to execute one shot and then go to the next shot and then to the next shot. He's not holding things dear to him to go, oh, I must do that the next time. I must warm up this way. Otherwise I'm never going to play great golf. It's like that, that correlation and causation elements. It might just have been an absolute fluke that you did that.
Yeah. We got a text recently of a player who scored pretty well in the final round. It was I was hitting it terrible in the range, but I just went with what I've got. Instead of, like, in the past he'd chase perfection. Yeah. And he shot a good score, because he was just like a acceptance of, like, this is what I've got today. I'm just gonna have to accept it.
But does all of this, Pete, not again come back to some key principles that, what Stuart's just mentioned there, is that, I don't know the man, I've never spoken to him, but you see the golf he's produced. Scotty Scheffler is a man of faith, and it doesn't have to be about faith. That's all different.
Yeah.
That'd be a big podcast if we ever did that. But fundamentally, at some level, my interpretation with Scotty Scheffler is that he goes on the golf course, and at a very deep level, he knows that whatever happens, he's going to be okay. Now,
Yeah.
now you can say, well, that's fine because you're world number one and all the rest of it. But my counter to that would be that's been with him for a long time, and his faith's been with him for a long time. And I think this idea that I'll be happy at some point in the future when I get on tour, I win the major or whatever. In many ways, that's the fundamental delusion a lot of people are under, isn't it? Which causes so much anxiety.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of players that get to tour and absolutely hate it.
Absolutely, Stuart. Yeah.
It's just, it's not what they thought it would be. It's not, the pressures are too extreme for them and whatnot.
Which then I think what we've been talking about all this session is that when you're coming from that place where I'm going to be okay regardless, then you can really explore adaptability, Pete, can't you? It feels dreadful today, but can I get it round with that? Can I find some way of putting some numbers together with what I have, the thoughts and feelings and sensations on this day?
I think it comes back to that emotional stuff. It frees you up. I mean, even just the simple one that shared a paper recently with us with regards to like just emotion and gait in adults. So like how people are walking, they got to simulate basically anger, frustration, happiness, and just looked at them biomechanically how they walked. It completely changed the way they walked, their movement. Yeah, just by doing the simple gambit of like emotions, like walk angry, walk frustrated, walk, So I think
You've had a Barney with your missus and you literally out the door, like with the dog, like literally charging down the street, like a speed walker.
And then you've got a slippery 3 foot left to right on the first.
Exactly that. So I think, yeah, absolutely. It's like, and I know we're talking about today, but it's often overlooked about, like you're going to be okay if you miss that 3 footer.
Yeah.
And a recent player who was maybe a little bit worried about sponsors and what they were thinking about them was like, I use the example we use in the UK is like today's news is tomorrow's fish and chip paper. It's like it's the sponsors won't be worrying about what you've shot tomorrow.
Yeah. Just one final point. This has been a great conversation, but just one final point, bringing it back to club golfers and what we've talked about in terms of interacting with the golf course. What would be some thoughts that you could have for anybody listening? They might be 20 handicap, 10 handicap, 15 handicap. How could they look at the golf course that they've played a million times and they think that they know it, but they probably don't? How could they look at that differently that would maybe facilitate some improvement in performance?
I suppose it comes back to the predictive process and stuff. You only kind of know, you can only see your word where the stuff that you've seen before, like you're making the best guesses from. So sometimes I think it's useful maybe just to, even if you're not getting a coach, is like go and reach out to a better player in the club and like ask
I think
them,
that's very important.
ask them how they see like the certain shots or certain lies or certain situations.
Or how
Because-
would you play this hole?
Yeah.
How do you, I'm really struggling with this hole. How do you play it?
Yeah. So
Because then we look at that thing, Pete, that we speak about that. So we're looking at, information, action, situation, and emotion. So we spoke about emotion, but information is, if we just have the same information all the time, we get just switch off almost. So we need to be able to pick up information that's actually in that moment in time. And there needs to be information that's present in our practice that we're going to experience when we get on the golf course, right? So asking that player, that better player, what do you see when you see in this hole, right? Like you're trying to hit it there, trying to do it there. How do you do it? Oh, good player, but he's got to just rip driver, don't even think about it or whatever, just that kind of like that freedom to express type of motion. And then we have action, right? So action in practice. So we want to keep the movement that we do as close as possible to what we're going to have when we get on the golf course, right? So preferably hole, with some form of like idea of what we're trying to do with the golf ball and whatnot. But then also go, oh, there's that hole, I'm going to do this. And there's that hole, I'm going to do this. So that goes into situation. So what situations, if I can only get to the driving range, can I create based on my golf course that I'm trying to do based on the information that I've got off that better player? And that already starts to elicit emotion, right? Because I'm trying to do something different. And if it doesn't elicit emotion, then put a little challenge on it. Just say, again, one ball to be able to hit it, to there. And then I kind of move on to a different shot. So if we kind of keep as much of that present in our practice as we can, information that we're going to have on the golf course or we're going to experience on the golf course, do that on the range as well. Action, keep the action similar to what we're trying to do when we go on the golf course, has a higher probability of transfer. Situations, what situations can I play around with here? I have a one-shot lead coming down the last. I'm going for my best score ever around this golf course. I know this shot. I have a bunker front of the green, pins at the front. Okay, I need to add a little bit more to my yardage here and try and get it a little bit more deeper into the green or something like that. And that's going to, again, start to fuel certain emotions. So I think if we kind of keep those four present with club golfers and elite golfers, we're going to be able to transfer practice more to the golf course than they're just doing a practice exercise for the sake of it.
Yeah, I've had some people think about the idea that, in life in general, we love puzzles, don't we? People spend endless hours doing crosswords and Sudoku, and quiz shows are endlessly well watched by people. We wouldn't watch The Chase, and if we get a question wrong, stomp off and get really annoyed at ourselves and question our validity to exist. But that's what we end up doing with golf. But I think the frame of your home golf course is 18 separate puzzles to solve is a nice way of looking at it, because generally most people, they say they want to be consistent. Well, they're actually very consistent. They tend to be consistent in the way that they make mistakes, don't they?
I think as well, when you're at your own golf course, is like when I think of my home course, right, and I think of picture the first hole, there's multiple different ways that I played that hole, right, in competition with wind and all, what I hit off the tee and so on and so forth. And sometimes I think it just takes a little bit more abstract view for players to go, okay, my par here is a 5, right? Because I get a shot down here. So I know there's a load of rubbish down there with my drive, and I tend to kind of hit that. Wind's usually off the left and whatnot. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to plonk it down there, take that out of the equation, then plonk it down somewhere, short of the green, pitch on and see if I can make 4 or make 5. But just looking at it slightly different.
Yeah.
But then if they can only get to the practice range in the week once, try doing it.
Yeah.
There's no reason why you can't do that.
Well, amateurs is the word should. I hear a lot when you're saying that, Stu, but I should be hand driver here. I should be, it's like, no, you can't have a fairway to save your life. Maybe let's hit something else here. Yeah. I would also like what you're saying there is often with time constraints with amateurs, it's like, let's go after the biggest pain point as well. Like simulate all these things that Stuart's saying. But if my driver's the one that's causing me the most issues, maybe don't use it in performance at the moment.
Yeah.
But we work towards that. Yeah. We work, I see a lot of amateurs that maybe got limited time and they're trying to get good at everything. It's like, what's going to have the biggest impact on your score at the moment, right? If it's driver, then maybe take it out of the bag at the moment, but then work on it with your coach or what some of the ideas we've talked about today. Yeah.
What did we hear yesterday, Pete? One of the guys we were chatting to yesterday is this guy is really kind of technical, engineering mind and whatnot. And he was just like, oh, my swing's like this. And, I'm out of position here. Oh, can I see this? Can I watch? this. And the coach was like, well, look, you've hit 10 shots and they're all out the heel. So maybe can we just hit one shot out the toe to start with? So the guy, and he goes, so the guy goes, oh, right. Okay. So I don't need to worry about this and this. He goes, no, just try and hit it out the toe for me. So he's hit one, tried to hit it out the toe and flushed it right out the button, right? And like hit this really like tight draw. And he was like, oh, that was a little bit different. And then, but then as things like progress, he starts going, oh, can I just see that on video just to see? And the coach has gone, what do you need to see it on video for? You've just like ripped it straight down the middle of the fairway.
Yeah.
So let's try and do that.
Yeah.
It's
Almost
just
too simple. It can't be that easy.
almost.
It's got to be more complicated than that. That's often what I'll say is when you do a simple, I can make it more complicated if you want, but it's
I often say,
we're trying to shoot lower scores here. That's what it comes down to. We're trying to help people probably enjoy the game a little bit more. Nobody enjoys the game unless you're playing Augusta. If you go and shoot, 120, right? So, if you're, what we try to do, we're trying to help people practice better so it transfers a little bit more to the environment that they're actually going to play in, right? So club golfers, they enjoy it a little bit more. Elite golfers, they work up their rankings or earn more money or, progress to the next tour or whatever it is. And it's almost like going through the research and we've tried these things out as well and going, yeah, that's rubbish. That's rubbish. You just start throwing stuff away and going, yeah, we're not really sure that's kind of beneficial, to be honest.
Yeah. I know, Pete, we had this conversation last time, but in any sport, whether it's cricket or tennis or golf, that you've got a bat or a racket in your hand, if you catch it flush out of the middle of a cricket bat or catch it flush out the middle of a golf club, there's an intrinsically powerfully good feeling with that, isn't there? But how many people actually work on hitting it out the middle of the club more often? They'll be working around everything else, but you're trying to catch it flush out the middle with that intention. It's amazing how the body can then organise around that.
100%.
That's a beautiful point there, isn't it? To be honest,
it's sometimes we get detracted from that. It's that again, that we would call that a first principle. It's like hit it in the middle of the face. What's the ball doing? Yeah, because that's essentially, that feeling, that awareness. And there's multiple different ways to do that. You get an elite level player in front of you and ask them to swing it different ways, they'll find the middle of the face.
Like Carl's saying, it's almost that self-organization to be able to just go back to that. Okay, this is what I need to do at Impact. How can I organize myself to be able to do that? But I think, again, it comes back to that different models aren't different ways of viewing the world. Some people want instruction to go, do this, do this, do this. But actually, I think there's a point to that if you just can't get it. But there needs to be some exploration, going in that as well. Going, okay, well, what if I just try this? And like that guy said, just hit it out the toe.
Yeah. It's because as humans, we're pretty good at using tools, aren't we? We're pretty,
Yeah.
Hopefully you don't miss your mouth too often. You get it in the middle of your mouth when you try to put some food in there. A million other examples. But gentlemen, that's been absolutely fantastic. I thoroughly enjoyed that. And I was disappeared in the blink of an eye, which is always a good sign for me that I've been engaged with that. I know you've got a great podcast, but just for everybody listening, just fill in the details of the podcast and and all the programs that you offer that people can look into, which I think would be great for them to do.
Well, currently we use practicethinkers.com. We have a coach education course in there, it's practice masterclass, and we're building out a practice app at the moment that's currently in trial, and we soon to have to the market a player practice masterclass as well. So basically, like practical examples of like how to apply your practice better, essentially, and shoot lower scores. But I would say we are tailored more to the elite level at the moment. That is our market more at the moment, I would say. Anything you would add, Stu?
Yeah, so I think, with the coaching education we have. We're going to have a player education and then the app. So it's really the synergy between the three, right? So ideally you'd get a coach to do the course, players to do the course, and then you have the app. So everybody's kind of speaking in the right kind of language or a similar language. So they know what's kind of going on and whatnot. We get those kind of three things kind of connected together, then that's kind of the aim, really.
And the app's basically just what we do with private clients at the moment. We look at what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. We hold them accountable to standards as well. If their goal is to be a professional golfer, it's like, well, here what you're at. Here's where you're at the moment. We're looking at what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. We call it like 100 days of practice. So essentially, Stu's looked at like the amount of days an individual has in a year as a professional or elite level golfer, and it's minimum 100 days, isn't it, Stuart? On the
minimum, yeah. I mean, but it's like that concept of like, if you can do a really good focused 100 days of training, and practice in a year, we're pretty confident that you'll start to improve, to be honest, using some of these principles.
And then we're just like holding players accountable, is what we're currently doing, like making the boat go faster.
It just resonates so much with that. I mean, for 20 years or so, my fundamental principle, anybody I work with, if you want to achieve anything with anything anywhere in life, it's about accumulating good days, isn't it? If you put enough good days together, you're going to make progress. But that simple question, what does a good day look like, is not an easy answer, is it? You've got to get real clarity on that.
And it goes back to what we said at the start, helping them make a decision of like going, I'm going to choose today to do something that I don't want to do, but I potentially need to do. And then you start to go on to the next day.
Yeah. Pete, what was the website again that people can go to?
It's practicethinkers.com.
Right. Thanks ever so much for your time.
Thank you, Carl.
Thanks, Carl. Appreciate it.